Welcome back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And we're talking about peer groups. So Dan and I had the pleasure of attending a peer group meeting together recently. And one of the things that we like talking about, or that kind of struck us, is, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the construction industry gets sort of like an old boys club mentality, or a reputation, I should say, where everything's like real close to the vest and people don't like to share stuff and everything's a trade secret. But we've had we've been fortunate enough to be in some groups where that is actually like not true at all. Right.
Yeah, no, it's funny because, we've talked about it, that even within the company itself, within Berg, we have to be mindful of being tribal about stuff, about saying, well, I know this because I have this much seat time, and feeling defensive in a way that you don't want to help a younger guy and help them learn so that they can be better, for fear they might replace you. That's just the reality of it. And I think that's bolstered by years of the construction industry breeding that sort of thinking from bottom to top, from the operators and laborers all the way right to the guys who own the companies. And the younger, the newer, the fresher of the companies, we're really finding are not that way anymore. That it's not a big secret how we move dirt. We might figure out something clever that we think we can do, or have some new variation of a basin, or some new way that we want to do something that's mildly different, use a piece of equipment a little bit of different ways. But the reality is, even if we did it once, we probably weren't the first ones to think of it, and it'll catch on. So that's not what's going to make us, a solid company. And the reality has always been that there are limited people that have the equipment that heavy civil companies have. It's very expensive. It's an expensive industry to get into. So we grew up feeling the need to sort of protect ourselves. But I think as we've grown a little bit, we realize, and we've met some people who are like-minded, and we realize we don't actually have to do that. We can all work together to be better. And if we can just be a little bit more forward-thinking, a little bit more innovative, a little bit more proactive, we can be more successful while talking to each other and all avoid, some potential pitfalls. It's one of the things that, I said when I was talking to one of the gentlemen, I said, anything that you can tell me that helps me avoid learning something the hard way, I appreciate, because we've learned plenty the hard way already, and that's not a fun way to learn. So, and sometimes he says things, or some of the guys say things, and they don't think there's a whole lot of value in it because it's something that they know. And I'm taken back by it because I'm just like, I hadn't thought about it that way. So it's really a neat thing for me personally.
Yeah. There's very few things that are like new anymore, right? So most ideas are have been taken from someone else, or most ideas or new processes are derivatives of something that came before them. There are very few things that are like wholly original. And so what's fun about these meetings, and I will say, one of the benefits is that it's not very regional, right? So the groups that we met with recently, guys from all over the East Coast,
over the Eastern United States.
Yeah, Eastern United States. But they are all in very similar positions, right? The more conversations we have with this group, the more it reaffirms that everything is similar in every way, right? No, not exactly the same. Circumstances change, the labor market changes, the types of work we do change a little bit, but we're all struggling with the similar things, or are on different places in regards to the experience curve with the same things. And in that regard, it's really refreshing at times to be able to talk to people who have either already experienced it and can reflect back on what worked and didn't work for them, or who are going through it, and we can sort of collaborate on how we overcome the same obstacles.
Yeah. The other thing about that, Bri, is that when you talk about that curve, is that each of the people representing different companies in that group are at a different spot, as you said, in the growth of their companies, all the way from companies that have, gone full employee owned to companies who are singularly held like Berg, that are trying to figure out how we grow and how we manage. But even inside of that, when you break it down more, there's people that are in it because they grew up digging a ditch. There's people that are in it because they grew up in the actual equipment manufacturing industry. There's people who are in it who their parents owned companies. You know what I mean? There's people in every phase, but yet with all that varying difference, we're still all experiencing the same things and trying to find our way through, and oddly trying to navigate some things that probably we never thought of. We never worried about it. You know what I mean? Now we're trying to build culture, not as a selling point. And you and I have had this discussion many times. Nothing we do is to try and make someone buy something from us. Most of the stuff we do is to try and make us a place that you want to be with Berg, want to work for us because we do the right things. And doing the right thing is really the centerpiece of what we're building. And what's really refreshing is to sit there in this varying group of people from all over the Eastern United States, doing all heavy civil work, but varying degrees of different things in civil work. And all of them trying to do basically the same thing, trying to be the right thing just for the sake of being a good company. And then hoping that they can reap the benefits being having great employees.
Yeah, for sure. One of the challenges for me every time that we get an opportunity to do something like this is sort of valuing professional development. And I really struggle with that because we are so busy, right? As human beings, as an organization in our roles, that I struggle with the idea of like, can I afford to take 2 days, a day and a half to go somewhere else and not commit my time to what we're doing as an organization in those moments, to try and see if there's something worth hearing, worth learning. There's no guarantee, right? There's no guarantee of a return. There's no guarantee that we're going to walk into that room and we're going to hear something ground, shaking or something that just changes the way we look at things. But every time I leave one of those experiences, I've always gotten something from it. And I've never walked away saying, man, that was a total waste of my time. I should have been at work. I should have been doing something else, because there's always, for me at least, an opportunity to grow professionally and to take those things that we talk about and figure out if there's a way it can make our organization a better place to work in, to work with, etc. So,
yeah, I feel like I used to struggle with that more, and then I think I came to realize how, you just have to be confident enough to say, like, how inexperienced I am in the scheme of things. I often joke with you about, like, who is it that decided it was important enough to listen to what I had to say? Like, how did this happen? But in that same sense, like, I've really tried to make it that when I attend one of these things now, I try to step away. I try to let the team do what it is that they're built to do. Every day while I'm, in my office or working on something, we run efficiently. And they don't need me sitting there holding their hands. They do a great job by themselves, and try and step away purely so that I can clear my head and be ready to hear something that might actually be impactful that then I could take back to the group, because everybody doesn't get to go. It's not like we pack up all the team and say, hey, let's go to this meeting. And, there certainly could be value in that to take a bunch of people. But we're not capable of doing that. That's not how it goes. Mm-hmm. So being one of the few people who gets to travel and meet with people and talk about it, I've really made it a point to try and clear my head and really try and, spend as much time as them as I can. And I find myself sometimes when we were down there, the one night I stayed out fairly late, and I was just listening to two really intelligent people talk about a number of different things, and did I get anything from that, that 2 hours that I could have been asleep? I don't know, maybe, but I know what they said. I know what transpired, and I'm hopeful that if I piece that together enough, I'm able to bring something back to Berg different than I left with. And it's hard to do that when, you were down there and I almost laughed because you were like, well, I got a little bit of time, but I got like a meeting at this time, a meeting at this time. You had set up like 6 meetings after the meeting, whereas I was trying to like sit quietly and just enjoy where I was, but also think about some of the stuff. And I had my notebook with me and like write a few notes down about like, oh, well, they said this,
Right.
and try and make sense of it. Because the second I step back into Berg again, like you said, it's like stepping on a treadmill that's at full speed. It was running that speed the whole time. I just was able to get off of it for a minute. And so, that's important for me to be able to step away, but it is hard to do because you step away and you feel like, what value am I providing to the company right now?
Yeah. And I actually, I had to piggyback a couple things to that meeting, right? So I had to leave the day after the meeting and go to another meeting that lasted for a day or two. And I did. I sort of felt like I had to like squeeze it in, right? And I'll tell you by the second day of the second meeting, not the first day the first thing we were at, but the second day, the second meeting, I was like, holy crap, I've been away from the office for 4 days, and maybe it's a little bit of like a FOMO. I don't know, like what am I missing? What is not happening because I'm not there? And that's the weirdest feeling because my team is fully capable, and literally everything happened that should have happened while I was gone, but I just can't. In those moments where I have committed that it is time spent for work, that I will try and like squeeze in everything I can do work related. And
it's I often, for the guys listening, Brian and I have a lot of discussions about how we're different, but we're also the same.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I feel like that's another one of those ways. Like my ability to delegate has put a lot of the guys who are listening to this podcast in bad spots at times because I'm willing to delegate. Did I actually empower them? Did I give them the resources that I needed? Am I there to support them? Maybe not, and I feel like you go the other way where you give them everything they need, but you're like nervous that like, are they okay? Like it's like two sides of being a parent,
Sure.
Like I'm the parent that like, I want my kids to fall and fall a lot because if you learn to fall, people that know how to fall don't get hurt. You know what I mean? But that's that's how you end up at the emergency room because somebody took a fall and they didn't survive, so they didn't survive it without an injury, I should say. But, but the flip side of it is that it's also hard when you want to make sure everything's okay, and so I think it's one of the ways that we play really well off each other is that we see it. And so sometimes I'm able to notice that like, I'm being a little bit cavalier here with just expecting that I'm going to get the result I want because I said, hey, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that you get the similar benefit that you're like, okay, well, I can give them a little bit of space because my team's, solid. I mean, I accomplished a number of things on Friday when you weren't here. We're just talking to your team, going over things. I was talking to the girls, I was talking to Tracy, I was talking to Decker and trying to get a few things done, not because you weren't here, just because I was moving. They had done what they needed to do that was, required of them. And, still had the ability to help me get some things done so that when you got back, I was prepared to, talk about a few things that you and I discussed while we were traveling.
Right. Yeah, no. Yeah. And I just, sometimes I just need to get out of their way. Right.
Yeah. And that's one of the hardest things, isn't it? I mean, I find myself oddly being like simultaneously out of the way and in the way, you know what I mean? Because like I step out of the way to let them do it, but then I ask a question that completely sidetracks everybody that if I had been involved, I would have known the answer, but because I wasn't, I didn't. But then I still desire to know the answer. So then I ask somebody the question and then they're sidetracked completely, and it's actually Longwood's been interesting as we had, as Dylan and Shay and Chris and Stetson and Dewey and Ben have really all taken ownership of that job and really moved it in a positive direction. We're really doing well there recently. And everybody's happy I attend these meetings because it makes the clients feel better that I'm there. They have input, right?
Mm-hmm.
To, the management of the company. But I really can add very little because I'm still only there once a day and I know what's going on, but I don't want to step on their toes, so I end up like leaning over and I'll like whisper something to Dylan or to Shay for just to check with them, and they can say what they want to say or react, or maybe I was helpful, maybe I wasn't. But it's the oddest feeling to be there, like as a just like a figurehead for the most part. You know what I mean? Like just to be there because I'm there.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I'm sure that I would hope they would say I'm adding some value when I go, but
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. But that's not actually my purpose. I'm going there to try and support them and let the client know that I support my team.
Right. And remove obstacles, right? I mean, sometimes you're there just to make sure that other things don't get in the way of our team doing their job, right? You mentioned like little contractual things, making sure that we are paying attention to the details so that at times they can, push progress.
Because
right?
I mean, and that's something we talked about down, at the peer group is supporting the team, you know what I mean? Putting them in the best position and making sure we know what they know, sort of completely jumping the tracks. You and I were having a discussion this morning about safety, and we were just talking about like how we manage that and how we provide expectations, and sort of along the same tribal lines, like how we make it that it's okay to say, hey, not even that I don't know how to do it, because we all feel bad doing that. The example I gave to you was about a jumping jack. We were talking about jumping jacks, and I said, like, for the most part, you go to start it, it's a gas engine, it's a carbureted gas engine. You know what I mean? It's just a lawnmower.
Sure. Yeah.
But then you go to get it off the truck. And I said, like, I could see myself telling you that I blew out my back lifting a jumping jack off because apparently I'm too old and I shouldn't do that anymore. But I can also not really see myself saying, hey, can someone help me lift this off?
Right.
And I also can't tell you how much a jumping jack weighs. So I really have no business lifting it off because I don't know, even per our standards, which I know are standards.
Right.
Should I lift it? I don't know, because I don't know what it weighs. You know what I mean? But if somebody told me, well, how'd they hurt their back? Well, they were lifting a jumping jack and hurt their back. I'd be like, what were they thinking?
Why didn't they ask someone
Why
to
didn't
help?
they ask someone to help them? You know what I mean? And it's one of those things. There's a difference between tribal and silo, but I think there's some tie there where we got to be a team. You know what I mean? And we all get done more efficiently and safer, and everybody gets back home if we all just pull in the same direction and don't let pride get in the way of just going to do a solid job.
Yeah. And you get in that mentality of like, well, I don't want to ask for help because their time's valuable too, right? Like I got to interrupt somebody from what they're already doing to get the information I need or to get the support I need. Yeah, that's challenging for sure. And I think that, some of what we're talking about is like the communication component, right? And taking the time to sort of think through what the message needs to be. I think these peer group meetings do help me with that, right? Are we saying the thing? Are they hearing the thing that we were trying to say? And that comes through in a lot of different ways. We just talked about it this morning. And we try as hard as we can not to separate into teams, right? Like, but in reality, you oversee most of the field personnel, and I oversee most of the office personnel. And those aren't supposed to be two different teams because they're crucial to each other's function. But in a lot of times, our potential for a lack of understanding or comprehension of the terminology that you're using, or vice versa, creates situations where we aren't sure what the other's asking for and then can't believe it's not happening, right? So we talked a little bit about my team asking for information in a specific way and getting an answer that appeared to present as though like what we thought was a standard practice wasn't being followed, and your team responding to your inquisition, you're questioning them, like what's happening here, and them saying that's ridiculous, we're definitely doing this, and it was like just two different words for the same exact thing, right? We're asking for, we're using a word that we thought was common internally here. You're using a word that is system driven, right? By how the information gets entered, and it's the same exact information, and we're both looking at each other like, why doesn't this exist?
And you know what is really, I think, ironic about this is as we have the discussion, and you and I had already talked about it, is that is what happened, right? And my view as I started to break it down and think about like, how are we getting here? It's one of the things I was trying to work through on Friday is how did we end up in this spot that this isn't working? And I took it from an operational standpoint. You know what I mean? Like you're taking it from I don't know what the right word is, but from like looking at the picture and this is the problem and it's a language barrier. We both agreed that we were giving you a different thing because of our names were different. But I viewed it as like, we have a critical path problem here. Like critically, like you need this information or else you can't give me the information I want. And I need that information. Otherwise I can't know where we are day to day. So both of us on a critical path need this, but somehow both groups think that because they didn't get the information to the other people, it's somehow like it moved off of the critical path. I was like, this is crazy, guys. Like, I really don't care what we have to do. We have to get into accounting this information. And they were like, well, we don't know what else we can do. We already have it and we don't understand why it's not working. And then I talked to the accounting side and I'm like, I don't understand why you don't have this. And they're like, well, they just keep giving us these numbers. And at that point I was like, wait a minute. Did we look to see? And like, we hadn't looked to see on either side.
Right.
We didn't look to see what we were giving you and you didn't look to see what you were receiving. And I was like, this is crazy. Like everybody's all upset, all worked up, trying to get to the same resolution. All we all wanted was the exact same thing, which is take the information that we know what it is and deliver it from one of our systems to another. And that's what's funny is very few people at Berg got into any of this because we want to run with systems. It wasn't that we were like fans of Heavy Bid and like, hey, I love HCSS. Let's go figure out something we can do where we get to use HCSS.
Let's start a company so we can use that product.
I'm pretty sure that Kels and Kelly and you didn't fall in love with QuickBooks and Foundations. Say, what I'd like to do? Spend my life in QuickBooks and Foundations.
Right,
you know what I mean? But that's where we end up to facilitate Berg being able to run. And so much like the peer group, you end up with people who are qualified because they have the ability, but not necessarily because someone trained them how to do it. And then you end up with all these language barriers because we just, call it whatever we want to call it. I mean, when we were down at the peer group, and I think I said supervisor or superintendent or foreman, and we use those terms interchangeably, and they're not interchangeable. Like they should have different definition of who is what, and if you can do certain things, you're a certain thing.
You hear one thing or the other.
And I was confusing some of the other guys there because they had more structure where, a superintendent was this, a foreman was this,
right?
A site supervisor, what's that? You just combine two things. What does that even mean? Do you have all three? And a general superintendent, like you start to throw all these terms and we just,
right.
And at the end of the day, if you don't have a good breakdown of what it is, then you don't know. Another funny thing I thought down there was one of the guys, he just has great one line that we all write down. Like you see him say something and it's not even that he said something that you could learn. He said something that was so exactly what you wanted to say, but didn't have a way to say it. And so we write down things. And that's after our second meeting, I was sitting there and I was like laughing to myself, looking at some of the notes I had written of things he had said.
Right.
I mean, he had the one about, if you pay business, I'll mess it up, but basically if you pay business development, you got to be careful because sometimes all they do is bring dead squirrels home.
Drop off dead squirrels.
They just drop off dead squirrels. I was like, God, that's exactly what can happen at times. You bring in things you don't want,
right.
And then with Kelsey, when we were both away, Kelsey had a question about something that had gone on. And he had just said, you have to respect the lines that you draw, which is really simple. Anybody would say that. You'd say, hey, if you make a rule, should you follow that rule? Like, yeah, you should. If you bother to make it, you should probably follow the rule. But how many times do we as individuals or as a company make a policy and then we immediately come up with exceptions to that policy because, but it's inconvenient, and I'm like the king of inconvenient. Like I want to make a rule. And, Brian and I laugh because we'll say, I really like process so long as the process doesn't limit me doing what I want to do.
Sure.
Because I got to get where I'm going, Brian. So if the process slows me down, that's a problem, and that's why I wrote that down. And it was one of my biggest takeaways, something so simple that I have to be able to realize that if I'm going to make a rule, a process, everybody's got to follow it, including me, which means I need to think a little bit before I say or agree, this is what we're going to do, And so it's little things like that. The impact of that over the next, 20 years could be immense if we can just realize that we're going to stop asking people to do things until we're sure that we actually know what we want them to do.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And and I think, the one thing I got from that conversation personally was, right, we have to be very intentional about creating the expectation, because you can really quickly get yourself and your team in a sticky spot if your expectations don't align with what what you're telling people is their responsibility or what they're supposed to do. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it was
What he said something funny or no?
the dandelion one.
That was a good one, but I was thinking about the toothpaste.
Oh, that wasn't him, but yeah, he said, well, we can't put the toothpaste back in the
Tube.
back in the tube
Yeah,
now.
Yeah. Yeah.
He said
So,
once something happened, he said you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, and it was like they're just funny little sayings, but
yeah.
it's because we all feel the same. We all feel the same stressors that we're all. I think that when you get to a certain level, and I think the level is probably foreman. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about being CEO. I'm talking about being a foreman, that you're really good at solving problems, at confronting issues and then resolving them, and the more you do that, or the more successful you are, or the faster, or the more you can focus on multiple problems at once, then potentially the more you could take on responsibility wise. But at the end of the day, that is a great quality, except, and this goes back companies ago when I saw a presentation, is if all you do is firefight, you can be really good at firefighting and people love it because they're like, God, they just put out fires. But what you didn't notice is that you set the fire.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You're like
right.
an arsonist. Like you just keep allowing fires to happen.
Right.
And then you put out the fire and everybody's like, great job putting out the fire. But why did everything have to be on fire?
Why did we have that fire in the first place?
Right. Why do we have to have everything on fire before we look good? Like, why can't we just be prepared and just do the thing? And it looked just boring. Like we get back to that word when we say about like, if we could be boring, and nobody wants to be boring.
No. Well, we don't want to be bored.
Right.
And I think there's a difference, right? I don't know. Maybe not. But for me, there's a difference. Like we don't want to be bored. And for me, being bored means we don't try new things. We don't take, and I say risk, but calculated risk, very calculated. But boring though means, in my mind, that we've planned, we prepared, we executed, and it turned out the exact, hopefully, way we expected it to do.
Like limit chaos.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I don't mind that when things are boring, because I think it gives us the opportunity to go do new things or other things, which keeps us from getting bored.
Yep. No, it is a funny thing that we've discussed many times, on the podcast as a group, as a leadership group, and as a company. Is that if our best days are when we're doing things that we plan to do. What do we always say? We're doing something that we know in a place that we know for people that we know. When we do that, we succeed. Like 100% of the time we succeed. And that is both boring and fun. You know what I mean? Like, so there's like the hard part is,
right.
You know what I mean? If we've done very well with certain companies working within a half hour to an hour of this shop, doing certain things. And I would not say they're boring.
No.
But the repetition and the efficiencies that we have gained from doing them over the years makes it less chaotic. And that is an improvement because there's less likelihood of something blowing up and you having to fix it and put out a fire, and so that's part of one of the discussions we had down there in a roundabout way, and another great thing in those groups is that you just sort of meander, but you're all on the same page, because you're all just, you're all fighting the same battle. You're all trying to do the same thing. And that's really refreshing, like you said, to see that you go out with a bunch of different people of different ages from different places with different size companies. And yet you're all trying to do the same thing. And nobody's, even the person who I would say is the most experienced, the furthest along, would say he doesn't have the answers.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just trying to figure it out.
Right.
And he's looking for guidance other places.
And he gets it, right? And he gets stuff from the meeting, right? Which is always interesting to me, that even, the most senior of us that, has way more years of experience and has been in more circumstances, he still he says like, how valuable the time is spent hearing what other people are doing. So,
yeah. And that's part of what I think I've really tried to force myself to slow down when I'm doing these things, is because if he can see value in it, how much value am I probably even missing? You know what I mean? Like, if I don't slow down and pay attention, how much value am I missing just because I'm not willing to pick my head up and look at it? So and it's a great experience. I mean, you get to go away, you get to pick your head up and be outside of the day to day, and then you come back in feeling a little refreshed, or at least I do. It's, ironically, my girls, when we do it, the girls tell me, I'll say like, I gotta, on Thursday, I was like, I gotta get back to work. I was like, girls, they're like, you were just away for work for like multiple days. You haven't even been home. And I was like,
you were working.
I wasn't working. I was working, but I wasn't at work, and that's where I get to like the fear that you speak to, where I'm like, but I got to get back in the office. Like, who knows what could have happened? Like, and I got here, nothing.
Yeah, everything was fine.
Everything went exactly the way it was supposed to go. There was probably less problems than when I left.
That's probably a good place to wrap it up. But thanks for tuning in, folks. We appreciate you listening, and we hope you got something from it. And catch us again on another episode soon.